thank you, Indira. We're going to move on to a session that I'm looking forward to. It's a real privilege to have some customers speak at these events. The last kind of couple of years, it's all been consultants and people who work as Microsoft partners, but it's really nice to hear a story from a customer. And so next we've got Westpac, and we've got Shaun Anderson, who's going to be kind of sharing their Dynamics 365 and Power Platform journey with I guess over the kind of the years. So it's very interesting to see what they've done, and I'm going to now hand over to you, Shaun. If you just want to share your screen, we can get started. There we go. I'm just sending you live. There we go. Perfect. Seamless. There you go, mate. I'll let you to it. And you're on mute at the moment. So
cool. Got that. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Power Friday, Microsoft, Rami and Hamish for including us this time around. I think this is a great initiative, and it's good to join up and share our experiences across New Zealand, in particular Auckland. So I'll just give a bit of a background and intro. So the story today, I'll just represent some emergence of Dynamics and Power Platform at Westpac, and then just give you an intro of who I am, how we fit in, and how this almost quite exciting emergent journey is sort of coming to light. So about a year and a half ago, Westpac had a considerable sort of restructure and reorganization into something called an experience hub, and it's led by a CXO. This experience hub is almost like an implementation engine of the organization. It's essentially sort of split into org units called tribes, and you have co-leadership of a tribe split between a tribe lead who's more business focused and looks at the what, and a tech area lead looks at the how. It's based on sort of a Spotify organizational model. And I'm the tech area lead of what we call the business services tribe. And we have a pretty significant engineering component focused on D365 and emerging Power Platform. There's over 60 software platform quality engineers in our tribe, and we've also got a growing component focused on a sort of cloud native replacement of a corporate core banking platform in the bank. So our tribe is focused on step change and modernize initiatives for the bank. Anyway, enough of that sort of stuff. So essentially what I'm showing you here is quite a lot of work I've done with a couple of the Microsofties too, and we're looking at, so namely Daniel Lunn, John Sun, Ollie, Brendan, and always consult with Rami. And we sort of, how do you get some coherence around a big platform like Dynamics Power Platform? How do you look at this cloud opportunity in a highly regulated environment? And how do you line this up with customer experience? So this story will give you an indication of our journey we've been on and where we're trying to get to. So we've called it Art of the Possible, and we're going to show you some of the emerging opportunities with Dynamics and Power Platform, and sort of how do you get a true north, and how do you keep options open with a platform that's changing all the time. So I'm just trying to go to the next slide. So what we found is that there's these continual emerging possibilities of Dynamics and Power Platform at Westpac, New Zealand. We have quite a large footprint that has been emerging, and this is across tribes, so across different organizational units with business customers, stretching through consumer to business. There's over 15 of these different initiatives, and this sort of demonstrates rapid growth of our ecosystem use as a whole. We have a well-specified functional roadmap, but the actual technology platform itself, we find we're not that coherent. But here's where it's balanced between control and just enabling innovation to happen, and then trying to open up the gaps to do that. We've got a regular, what we call special interest group, and what we found, I'll expand on that sort of evolution later, but what we found is that we're getting these POCs, these sort of experimentations of at least one a week that are sort of emerging out of the Power Platform as a whole. And when I'm talking about that, I mean not just anything in the D365 sort of landscape, but including Power Platform, Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI, Power Virtual Agent, RPA, and often sort of traditional on-prem architecture technology can't really keep up with that sort of rapid growth and rapid feature set that just gets enriched week by week. So it's a fine balance, and we generally find that there's a huge amount of unmet potential, and what we're trying to do is try and harness this emergence, comply with policy, but also try and get some sort of anti-toil control around this. So what we're finding is we can actually use the platform to automate our controls going forward in a highly regulated environment. Quick background, sort of an old style, familiar representation of Dynamics, Power Platform, and the rest of the ecosystem, but this sort of gets outdated. What you suddenly realize within a year, there's a change. This is actually what the sort of Dynamics ecosystem looks like now. And that's excluding that sort of bottom layer that we somehow call the Power Platform. Everything here is interrelated, as everyone might know. Where we sort of play at the moment, our current niche in that sort of red square in the top left is in that functional space, which is a tiny bit of the sort of entire ecosystem, if you look at it like this. And I'd say we've got some pretty world-class depth, so very narrow focus, but this is changing with awareness of this ecosystem point of view. Now, traditionally in large organizations, they'll think of stuff in the functional sphere. What we tend to undervalue is that interlinkage between everything in an ecosystem like Dynamics and Power Platform. It's almost hard to define. What is it? It's not SaaS. It's not software as a service. This is my opinion, but and sometimes I see things differently. It's definitely not IaaS. Dynamics plus Power Platform is almost a development platform as a service. And then that integratability, the underlying sort of data structure, common data service or Dataflex Pro, what were Microsoft thinking calling it Dataflex Pro when we're starting to realize, geez, common data service makes sense, CDS, CDM, all of that. There's a hidden sort of value that we all tend to not so much ignore, but actually it's a core of that interchangeability, interlinkage that we can harness. When you sort of pivot this, so almost try and take all of this and try and make sense of it, pivot dynamics on the left, and it's important to keep that underlying data technology, common data service on the left, and keep that as sort of a y-axis. And then you've got the underlying platform, and that's not complete. So underlying power platform, call it, which is not complete. We're leaving out Azure serverless, which we actually use a lot. So some of our initiatives, I've had to remove some of the names, called policy, apologize, where we've got a machine. It's a big steam train, and we're driving out a lot of process re-engineering and automation. And a lot of that can have synergies with Power Automate, and we're finding that out now, Power Automate. But the interesting thing is, if you take traditional architecture and you map out like Gartner and say, what's the optimum sort of automation software you can get, and you start then you start comparing Power Automate with BPM and all of that. But what you tend to miss with that traditional on-prem architecture is the interlinkage, that synergy you get with it being part of that same platform, especially cloud. And that sort of widens the scope, and it's trying to communicate that continually. There's this dynamic tension that we have with almost needing to educate internally the benefits of using this as this entire ecosystem. And then we look at certain things like BI. So traditional BI, you might have thought in the past, certain competitors won't mention their names, but these things have sort of traditionally been seen as sitting on their own, a platform on their own, and in some ways that can limit the opportunities you have with this Power Platform, and we're finding that out now. So if you're developing some sort of application on Dynamics and you call it a name, that's seen as a black box, and end users might say, geez, we can't get data out of cloud, but it's like, we've got Power BI, it's easy. And you might think, but Shaun, you telling us stuff we know. But the thing is, if you think your organization and how things can silo, you might have an owner of Power BI as this platform because it should be sitting in a certain area, and you have an owner of Dynamics, and things don't meet. But as we know, things do meet. Everything is interconnected with this platform. We've seen emergence of stuff. I mean, the last time I touched code in anger was probably about a year and a half ago, and I used to think I was at cutting edge with a lot of Power Platform and Power BI. Recently had a sort of innovation afternoon with a set of the engineers and devs and teams in Wellington, and then realized the huge jump in features in Power BI, especially around data lineage, that are part of the platform as standard, and we're only really discovering the possibilities of that. Sort of Power Apps, the progression of Power Apps, Canvas, model-driven apps, being able to drive out that interlinkage with common data services standard in that app. the capability there for rapid innovation is almost moving ahead of what organizations realize is possible, what to do. And then Power Virtual Agent, yeah, let's make a bot. It sounds like future state. What we're discovering is it's right here, right now. You start combining that with Lewis and some of the bot framework, and you can really have something quite ninja right now. And we're discovering that. Time to market is incredible. And then portals. I don't know whether everyone or anyone remembers Light Switch. You might have applications, Forerunner to sort of Power Apps, but this stuff is getting out of date. But a lot of large enterprise might have legacy Light Switch applications, and we're finding there's huge opportunity with Power Apps portals in some of our landscape, and you only discover that as you go along. So some of the challenges, as I've been saying, what we find in an enterprise, and it probably is similar to a lot of other enterprises, not just in financial services and banking, is that almost each part of an ecosystem is viewed as an unrelated sort of application. And this relates to our almost traditional architecture capability views. Different elements sit under different areas. How do you look at Power Platform and its associations with D365 and M365? How do you look at ownership? And we're working through that continuously. Part of policy views each potential solution. You want to build a solution, you normally have a lot of policy where you're looking at design and does this fit with our sort of strategic endpoint, and often security design might see each potential solution and view each potential solution from scratch. However, there's certain elements that are common in terms of the platform, from security, from access, from identity. They all sort of common, and there should be something we can take advantage of to make that more efficient, to sort of remove that governance overhead. We have a current state situation where it is actually easier to do and develop working solutions versus design and getting approval for them, because of this interoperability. It's easier to almost show and tell, and actually get POCs out and before getting design and approval. If you think of design, there's a lot of things to consider. It's easy to spin up something and show it actually working and showing the capabilities. How do you explain the capabilities of a Power Virtual Agent to someone that hasn't really experienced it, unless it's someone reinventing the wheel and trying to put it together in-house, and then suddenly it's this full intelligent bot that's ready to go, low code? Yeah, it's difficult. So we have this overhead intensive internal governance, high toil, and we've got this interconnectivity, which is a huge benefit, and that's often undervalued. And also that underlying rich sort of data technology, CDS. I mean, what is CDS? It's not SQL, it's not NoSQL, it's not SharePoint, but it can be any of those. You've got advanced find, you've now got SQL endpoints, you can store documents straight in it if you want to. So similar to SharePoint, it's amazing tech if you think about it. So some of the things so we sort of not waiting. There's so many opportunities, target-rich environment, and we're trying to evolve this practical way forward as a community in the organization. So working with some of the Microsofties, trying to get a joined up strategy for Dynamics and this Power Platform. We've got a huge journey where we are looking at the customer and everything's focused on the customer. But how do you leverage what this amazing platform has to offer? So you might be looking at Dynamic CRM as that big functional label, but there's stuff behind the scenes, customer insights. There's all of that are available and quite easy to use by do and show. How do you communicate that? I don't know the best way. But what we're trying to do is just look at this show and tell continuously and almost bring everything trailing in its wake, and drive that through. How do you get this more platform enabled? We're looking at just opening sort of opportunities for experimentation to explore, but also be safe. Embracing this show versus tell. During COVID, we managed to get an app out for COVID response within a couple of days, and that wasn't Shaun, the tech area lead, demanding we need to do this from devs. It self-formed. This was almost engineer driven, and it's almost, how do you open the gaps? How do you take the rap for crossing some sort of imaginary security line, and making that app available to everyone in the bank? So getting an app where almost you could take the pulse of everyone's feelings in the organization at any time. So better than a sort of filling in forms. So it's almost like a pulse health check of the entire organization at any time. And it could evolve like that, but it's seen it different to traditional sort of questionnaires that are just a point in time. How do we rethink IT and business support with something so powerful, where there's a low code element, and actually people that are less techy, who aren't engineers, can actually start developing, start creating stuff with almost a higher level of abstraction. How do you see that as not a threat to IT? It augments IT, right? How to support business, how to enable that self-serve and rapid innovation and co-creation between IT and sort of our business partners to actually focus on customer. And then sort of thinking of coordinating and supporting these various Dynamics and Power Platform initiatives. I mean, if you plan for this, you can plan until eternity. But also, how do you get these frameworks for self-innovation, sort of decision-making, sort of how do you support that design decision-making and deployment to production? Certain things are coming out that make it easy to do that. If you think of the latest ALM stuff with some of Power Platforms, so meaning you can put a Power App on our Azure DevOps pipeline and ensure that full sort of CI/CD aspect corresponds with the rest of what you call serious IT development. That actually helps out a lot. How do you build capability? One of the gaps is through that learning and sharing, restating the obvious. There's entry points to be able to get full guidance, full learning for engineers to expand horizons, and we're working through a lot of that to try and get that emergence within the enterprise and start driving that out on a wide scale. So some of the things we tried to conceptualize, I mean, the wording almost sounds boring, but what we've been doing is try to split this stuff out. We try to call it Agile Dynamics Model, and that fits in with what we call Westpac ways of work and experience hub, but everything's totally changing. But how do you get something that sort of would be useful to drive out this platform? And what we're finding is there's various levels at which we are sort of doing stuff naturally, but there's opportunities that we're finding. So on the left is that conceptualization, which you'd call a value creation office. And I had a good think session. I've had multiple think sessions with Daniel Lund and people in the bank, a lot of wide teams. How do you get some coherence around this? And trying to indicate to people it's actually important to get this out there. And I often call it never does a good deed. So a good deed never really goes unpunished a lot of the time. But how do you drive this out when people aren't really seeing it? And we're finding that often it's make this practical, drive out the practical. So one of the elements we've got that lined up with a value creation office was communities of interest. And we've got this bi-weekly dynamic special interest group. And it sort of started off as this crusty tech talk, architects, engineers, just trying to share with other areas. So especially our area, we sort of led out a lot of this dynamics development that actually started with on-prem CRM, Microsoft on-prem CRM. How do other areas sort of develop on dynamics and sort of dynamics initially, and specifically dynamics CRM? And it was basically just trying to, we wouldn't have time to help other teams guide them through the process, but hey, we've got a conference page and teach a fisherman how to fish sort of thing, and give them everything that's needed to start up and be there, just available to answer questions. That was the initial thing, and it was probably 6 or 7 people in a room, and we'd take questions if they needed it, and it was very boring. It's now sort of developed into this bi-weekly. Often there's up to 60 people coming in. It's not just engineers, it's full demos, and it's really cool. It's people that are just there for the interest, and there's sort of a side effect of that where people are driving out cross-tribe initiatives under their own steam. So passionate about the platform, what it has to offer, and it's not just engineers. Some of the less technical who might be involved in the experience sort of hierarchy, service owners, SPOs, really getting on board and driving this out just based on enthusiasm, knowing just a minimum of what this platform has to offer and how easy it is, time to sort of market. The other thing that we're trying to do is embed innovation with this platform into our ways of work. And we had an interesting session trying to put this into our regular sort of sprint cadence at the end of a sprint, have a sort of afternoon to almost give back to engineers that are taking their own time to experiment because they've got squad responsibilities. So, but because their passion for this really overflows over and above what they need to do during work to deliver as part of our sort of 3-week sprint cadence, is trying to give back that time. And how do we co-discover this and match some of what we haven't used in the platform to something sort of fuzzy sitting on the backlog that we don't know how to fit. Experiment with the platform. Try and make that open. We had a first session of this pre-COVID-2 lockdown, and it's how to sustain that momentum and augment this into your current agile ways of work. Other parts that we're trying to concentrate on is how do you optimize sort of our governance layer and get that support from architecture and security and educate internally. What we're getting is enthusiasm from these different areas to onboard and be part of certain POCs, but I hate the term POC. That's almost conventional IT, and this is very unconventional. It's almost full practical working out in prod of some of the stuff to show what's happening. So, and trying to map that back to our traditional on-prem sort of policy, and showing how it's often superior to what the intent of these policies are in the first place. And the only way you can communicate is by actually showing and building it out. So it requires risk from some of us as leaders to skate that fine line and almost show how safe it is at any point, but being responsible at the same time. So protect the engineers experimenting, encourage that, and then take the rap, create that bubble for them, but try and get that fine line with responsibility. So another thing that how do you leverage the platform itself to support and coach end users of some of elements of the platform? And in some of our areas, we've got an outstanding what we call microcare model that we have in one of our areas. Try and automate that entire microcare model. And one of the best things to do that is use some of the advanced things that you might think of with the Power, with Dynamics and Power Platform, and one of those is virtual agents, and we're driving that out, even though it hasn't really been sort of officially recognized, but we can actually show this working and how it can work. We can show it, and that should help us drive this through. We can demonstrate that value quite easily. And very important is building internal capability. Look, some of our engineers I'd classify as world class. I mean, we've probably got one of the few places around where we actually got a full bi-directional connection between what you'd call modern cloud. If you look at Dynamics and ecosystem with the past, full mainframe interaction, dealing with all sorts of mainframe aspects, and having that bi-directional. So our devs are they're full stack devs in a way, some of them, and very focused on lots of Dynamics and especially CRM from that stretches back to on-prem Microsoft CRM in the past and Dynamics AX, but how do you expand that view? How do you give that view of this full landscape? And one of the best is almost curated learning. How do you get something together that can expand point of view, not only for our engineers, but for the less technical, trying to drive that out and show in-house, hey, there's this concept called low code. It doesn't mean play dev. It doesn't mean less serious dev. It just enables a lot more people to get involved and almost get that higher level of abstraction and get something of value out. And when you want to scale that up, let the engineers come and get that onto pipelines. And stuff like that. And then there's a lot of learnings across the planet. I've come from an organization in Africa where we hit a lot of this journey quite a while ago, and it's almost become one of the case studies of center of excellence. And it's how do you leverage some of those and translate that into our language, our organizational language, our ways of work. And how do you get that cross-tribe? And we're doing various initiatives over and above my day job, but how do you carve out that time to sort of let the stuff gather its own momentum? So I suppose it's almost letting the platform show how cool it is and how much it has to offer. Some of the doing, I'll just round off giving you a little bit of a window. I'm just aware of time. So here's a snapshot. So after this session, I'm going to dip straight into our dynamic special interest group, which we have bi-weekly. And this is what we have. It's very unofficial Westpac stuff. There's a ninja that's obviously not very official. Just give a snapshot, but that's shared internally. Here's some of our agenda that we have. This is an example. So today today's special interest group, everyone will dial in Teams, and we'll have a welcome recap. And then I'm just going to inform everyone that might not be in on the Power Friday, hey, I presented some of this art of the possible to the rest of a wider community. And then we've had some interesting sort of cross-tribe where we've tried to practically build out something, but a lot of what we've built out there can transfer to the rest of the ecosystem. And then we'll have a demo of automating entire platform governance, and that's just today. And so it's probably an hour session, and then at the end, Microsofties can pipe up if they want to. I call them Dan the Man, Daniel Lund, Jean Sun. They often contribute. Ollie Lipsinen often contributes. Brenda Maher. Anyone can come in and contribute and see what's happening. And they often do. Microsoft really is coming to the party, especially this year, trying to contribute value, realizing how vast our investment is in the platform, and really driving that forward. Here's the structure of our last innovation time. The intent is this is a voluntary half day. We had this probably a couple of weeks back in Wellington. The team's there, voluntary half day, make time available for experimentation in order to sort of discover and create value with our ecosystem. It was sort of quite informal, self-forming teams, so anyone could get together, engineers plus service owners, agile coaches, anyone from change, and was open gates, let everyone experiment with the entire Power Platform with access to references. And then the end point was just to show and tell. So at the beginning, we had a sort of frontline business partner outlining a challenge, had a bit of Q&A, and we facilitated ideation in these self-forming groups, but it wasn't too structured. Daniel Lund was there, Jean Sun was involved. We had Fu Shen who offered a bit of time for meet the expert or consult with the expert. We had the likes of Rami on hand, who really passionate about the stuff and really showing some of the way. Got some really cool analysts who actually fully certed Microsoft trainers and Power Platform architects, and it's how do you leverage that everyone together, and then ending it off with, let's just show it. Don't talk about, show what you've done in the afternoon, and then taking forward promising examples. So we've got a lot of this trying to stimulate this usage of the platform in almost a non-traditional way. And we're trying to get this momentum and growth similar to how our dynamic special interest group has built up over time. So from a sort of very traditional type of get-together meeting, and anyone can ask us techie terms, to something that involves everyone across tribe, where everyone's welcome to contribute. Having that similar, infusing that into our ways of work. Unfortunately, can't be there to drive that out, but it's just trying to stimulate that continuously until it gains momentum of itself. And yeah, there's some of the outputs, running it all on Teams during the day, guys having fun, everyone's self-forming in these different groups, just showing how we, everyone could just ask Fushen at certain times, certain things that they might not be familiar with, and yeah, that's one of the things we're trying to drive out. Anyway, that's our journey. That's where we're at. It's very organic. It's trying to discover and integrate a rapidly changing platform and cloud, which won't stop for any traditional IT areas and organizations. How do you almost keep up and try and infuse that continual innovation into your organization, leverage that? And that's where we're at. That's our continual journey. And I hope some of what I've shown here, maybe some people across the community identify with, and also, if not, yeah, it's definite insight into how a highly regulated traditional organization is trying to work with exciting new possibilities ahead, and ride that whirlwind as such. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Shaun. Hey, mate, we've got a little bit more time. So I've been absolutely fascinated by this presentation. It's been awesome, and this is so great to hear your point of view, and just coming from an organisation like Westpac with a lot of governance and your security and policies, how you are. There's a lot of questions in that in your presentation around how do we kind of drive this sort of innovation culture? How do we make people feel aware of what's possible with the technology? Because you say there's so many opportunities available, and you don't even uncover them until you actually start playing with the tools and you're able to play with them, right? So that perspective you've got, it just resonates so much with me, and it's been spot on. And I've actually had a few text messages from people saying, "Hey, Shaun is on the money here." Yeah, I mean, do you guys collaborate much with other organizations in terms of, because I mean, you're obviously not the only organization like this, and I know that people are struggling, right? How do you move from these old ways of working with kind of waterfall methods and lots of governance and top-down sort of approach to approach where you give the power and the technology to the masses, and they start self-building stuff? It's hard, isn't it? Yeah. So do you collaborate with other companies on this?
No, well, look, not yet, but I think getting involved in communities like this is a good step, and actually sharing some of our experience, and if it is resonating, then it's worth other enterprises getting together and sharing some of that internal journey and some of those dynamic tensions we all sort of experience, I'm sure, and balancing with how do you open up the way. So this platform, and this technology, there's no room for egos and control. Otherwise you're going to lose. You can't. It's almost, how do you get it, and how do you be responsible, but at the same time loosen up the ability to learn and experience the platform for all the people that are involved, and give the safety to internal engineers, architects, security. You don't have to know this. Not everyone knows this. Not even Microsofties themselves probably can keep up with the pace of a lot of this stuff until they fully focus on certain parts of this ecosystem. And it's a case of actually learning what the capabilities are. I would suggest also there's probably an opportunity for Microsoft themselves, plus their solid partners, to be advocating for elements of their ecosystem, especially around governance, safety, all of that. Educate internally, sort of advocate. So going beyond advocacy, because knowing security might not be across how safe parts of this platform are, especially transmission of data, and stuff like that. There's a case for that internal advocacy. In some cases, that Microsoft badge and having that world expert actually counts. And that's not to say Microsoft partners are anything less than Microsoft themselves, but it's that certain level of engagement to be able to say to either security or to IT risk, hold on, doing it this way, the modern way, is more safer than trying to work around interpretations. And that would really open up further gaps for partners themselves. It's almost that seeding and having that authority of the people that have built this and keep building it, and just seeding that, hold on, here's the information. Hey, we building this for defense, or we building this for highly secure elsewhere. Have those case studies. Here's the certification. So not everyone might not know where to get the reference guides, and sometimes because some of this documentation and stuff is really good now. So if you go in at Microsoft Learn entry point, there's so much that you can get there, from documentation to code to all of that. Yeah,
no, I fully agree. And I think there is an element in society. I think, with Microsoft and the community, and myself and Rami and Guy, we work very, very closely with Microsoft on these sorts of things, and we have these discussions all the time around how do we provide a level of governance that everything is still safe and secure, but you're letting people into the platform. And so that is one of the biggest struggles at the moment. So I think I'd be keen to chat with you a bit more about how we could actually build a bit more of a community, because I think the Power Platform, you say, is so much opportunity, and I think it's kind of almost been held back a bit because people are a bit scared that it's going to be the next Access database or kind of Excel spreadsheet sprawl where you have no control over it, when actually if you know the facts, you have a hell of a lot of control as an IT administrator over and to be able to govern the system. It's incredible, and Microsoft set it up in that way purposely. But I think it's an enablement, and it's a education piece, as you've talked about, that you need to educate people about what it really is. And so I think as a community we've got a job to do here. But hey, thank you so much for your perspective, because you've helped a lot, and it's great to have a customer's perspective. It's always you've got partners who will in Microsoft who talk about it all the time, but someone like yourself who's actually done it, and you've got some examples. What I think you're doing is absolutely great. It looks amazing. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Pleasure. There's always so much that you think you miss, and really any others in community with some enterprise and stuff that really wants to connect. It could be a great plan in the future to sort of leverage ideas off one another as part of this community. Yeah, keen to do that. But cool, thank you for your time. Hopefully the muddled mess of passion was useful for everyone out there, and yeah, awesome. Have a great weekend. Everyone keep safe.
You too, Shaun. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.